So, welcome everybody to the EMN, the Early Career Members Network workshop on career development. We are the EMN, the Early Career Member Network Committee. So if you are an early career person, then please come talk to us if you have some good ideas for initiatives or if you would like to join the committee. We have tomorrow a reception that everybody that are early career members are welcome to attend. It's going to be fun, so please join, but let's get right to it. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers. We have first Krista Zanetti that will be giving us the perspective from a career pathway in government. Then we have Ralph Tautman that will be giving us the perspective from industry, and last, Barry Boyce, giving us the perspective on career pathways for academic lecturers. So, Krista, you join us?
Maybe just before Krista, you can come up. But Krista asked us to remind everyone, you should have all received a link for a survey last night. And if you did receive that, we would really appreciate you filling it out so that we can better identify what's going on in metabolomics and new strategies and stuff like that. If you haven't received that, we're going to be posting that link on the Facebook pages and on the website and on Twitter and stuff like that. So if you could please go look for that. And the other thing is that we'll have all of our speakers speak back to back, and then we will open it up for a panel discussion for the last 30 minutes and then have all the speakers answer questions.
Thank you. Okay, can everyone hear me? Am I too loud? Sometimes I'm too loud. Okay, just checking. All right, well, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak today. As they mentioned, I am going to speak regarding my position in government in the United States. So hopefully most of you have heard of the National Institutes of Health. It is the largest public funder of biomedical research in the world. We are part of the Department of Health and Human Services of the United States federal government, and we are one of 11 divisions within that agency. And the mission of the National Institutes of Health is to seek fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems and the application of that knowledge to enhance health, lengthen life, and reduce illness and disability. And so it's a pretty complex institution where there are actually, it's National Institutes of Health with an S. So there are 27 institutes and centers, each that has a different mission, priorities, and they all have their own budget. And it's usually organized by disease state. So I work for the National Cancer Institute. Do I have a pointer? Is there a pointer on here?
Use the mouse.
Oh, thank you. Move my drink. Sorry about that. So I work for the National Cancer Institute, so our focus obviously is cancer. And this is a little diagram of sort of what we focus on. And it's all spectrums across the cancer continuum, so basic science, cancer causes, risk factors, prevention, detection and diagnosis, treatment, control, survivorship, so everything you can think of with regard to studying cancer. So each NIH institute and center has a basic organizational structure. And so to understand what I do, you're going to have to understand where I fit into this big governmental machine. And so each one has an office of the director, and then they have two advisory boards, National Advisory Board and the Board of Scientific Advisors. Basically, they advise their scientific program, and they are secondary reviewers for some of their grants. So within each institute or center, there is an extramural program and an intramural program. At the National Cancer Institute, we have 5 extramural programs and 2 intramural programs. The intramural programs are research performed within the NIH. So those are our laboratory studies and our clinical studies. Where I am housed, I'm a science administrator. I'm housed in our extramural programs. And what we do is we fund research outside of the National Institutes of Health to the universities. So we primarily deal with grants and contracts. And so of those 5 extramural divisions, I fall in the division of cancer control and population sciences, and this is our organizational chart. So we have the Office of the Director, and then we have implementation sciences and health disparities and survivorship and a variety of offices. Then we have 4 key programs within the division. We have healthcare delivery research, surveillance research, behavioral research, and I fall into the epidemiology and genomics research program. So I am a card-carrying epidemiologist. And I am in the genomic epidemiology branch. So you're probably wondering, okay, but this is a metabolomics conference. Well, I actually will show you where I fall into that. So that's my home. And so what does the epidemiology and genomics research program do? So our vision is to reduce the cancer burden in human populations by identifying determinants of cancer risks and improving outcomes. And our mission is to fund research in human populations to understand the determinants of cancer occurrence and outcomes. And we foster interdisciplinary collaborations and development and the use of resources to advance cancer research and its translation to serve as the basis for clinical and public health interventions. So what we do is we build infrastructure and resources for you all to be able to do your science. So just as a quick note so you can see sort of what we do, this is where we fund the science. We fund methods and technologies, environmental epi, infectious disease, nutritional epi, clinical and translational epi, cohort infrastructure, so large population-based cohorts, we fund those. And I'll talk to you a little bit what we've been doing in the area of metabolomics and how it's very exciting. Because I'm trying to get you excited that government positions, they sound kind of dry, but they can actually be very exciting. And my job I love. I think it's fantastic. So I'm going to try to convince you that there is some really exciting things you can do in a more administrative position. We also have risk factor assessment, immunological factors, and then the genomics and epigenomics. So my branch specifically does a lot of complex things, and I started out primarily doing genomics. That's how I ended up in this branch. And then all of a sudden I did an assessment, and I thought, we have a large gap. Nobody's focusing on metabolomics. And my Ph.D. is actually in nutritional biochemistry. And then I did a Master of Public Health, which I'll talk about later, in epidemiology. So actually, it was a natural jump for me to start thinking about metabolomics at the population level and how we might incorporate that into large population-based studies. And this was about 6 or 7 years ago. So we look at gene-environment interactions, germline and somatic mutation interactions. We look at sophisticated analytical methods for genomics. Bioethics is a big factor for the omics research. And interpretation of functional genomics, the genetic architecture of cancer in populations and underserved populations, health disparities in global health, and public health genomics. But this is where I lie. I'm kind of the outlier, but I do metabolomics. And if you think about it in a sense, which you know, functional genomics, a lot of genomics, when you think about what's going on in genomics, sort of the read of some of the more functional aspects of genomics can be found within metabolomics. So I don't think it's too far of a stretch. I think it really falls a bit under the functional genomics interpretation, and so that's what I tell them. So what my job title actually is Health Scientist Administrator, which is like a long title. Some of you may have heard of something like a program officer or a program director. So we administer a program of science. So what I do, I support external investigators and the scientific priorities of my institute. So all the universities, we support them and we focus on the investigators that are out there trying to get funded, thinking about the infrastructure and resources that you need to get your science done. I do oversee and manage grants. That's probably a smaller portion of my job. I think people think that that's your main area when you work in government, if you're a funder, that you primarily focus on grants. I do have a grants portfolio, but my job is much more than that. Although I will say this is probably one of the most important parts of my job, because without that part, you all don't get funding or get what you need to do your research. We identify research gaps and develop concepts for funding opportunities. In the States, they're called request for funding announcement, a program announcement, or the SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Awards. And I actually do a lot of small business innovation research too, because of the technical aspects of metabolomics. And I'm going to show you a few things later about some of the fun stuff we did and exciting things we did to look at the gaps in metabolomics and fill those. We develop infrastructure and resources to advance science, so most of what I do is focusing on advancing the field of metabolomics and supporting what you do. We bring scientific stakeholders together to advance the science, so we do a lot of workshops and conferences so that we can hear from you to find out what actually needs to be done in the field so that we can draft things appropriately to move in the correct directions. We disseminate scientific findings and advances, so you'll see a lot of opinion pieces, a lot of summaries of data, and a lot of summaries of our portfolio in the literature if you look up my name. We serve as NCI liaisons and representatives to other organizations. So in my case, I'm actually on the board of directors of the Metabolomics Society, so I spend a lot of my time liaising between the metabolomics community and the federal government, the NIH. And we do help investigators build on their initial funded grants to further their research. When they come in for their competing awards, we do talk with them and think about what the best steps forward are. So they asked me to talk about pros and cons, so I'm going to do the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good, I am engaged in novel cutting-edge science every day, like really exciting stuff. A day doesn't go by where I don't see some of the best science that is out there. I have an opportunity to build and lead teams that set the agenda to advance science. I work with some of the most intelligent, creative, forward-thinking people that I ever have in my career. We all have the same mission and vision, and we move forward in teams. That's very exciting for me. I'm a collaborator. I'm a team person. Every day is different. Like, I come to work, I have to look at my schedule. I have no idea what the day is going to bring. I do all my own scheduling. I choose what I want to do. And so I never get into this boring rut where it's the same thing every day. I also, after 7 years of being in my position, I have a significant level of autonomy. I've developed my own programs. I focus in metabolomics. That is my area. And I'm the one that thinks about what needs to happen in that field to build the infrastructure and resources needed to support using metabolomics analyses in prospective cohort studies. Now, there is some bad working for the government, and these are the obvious things. For me, we are in the executive branch of the government, so every time we have a new administration or the new president, our priorities can change. We get a new director, so when the president and the administration changes, our director is a direct presidential appointee. So when that happens, in fact, we just got a new director about last week. So they change, our priorities can change. And you have to go with the flow, and also how we do things within the government can change. If they see things that they don't think are working quite right, they can change different requirements for us. So you have to really be flexible and just go with the flow. There's a lot of bureaucracy. So you have to understand federal policies and laws to get your mission accomplished. And sometimes it can be challenging. And if you don't like that stuff, it can be frustrating. I've learned to just kind of go with the flow, so I usually don't have any problem getting my stuff done. And the good thing is, there actually is no ugly, but I think every talk needs a Clint Eastwood reference. So I had to put that in there. So hopefully, all of you from Australia know what that movie is. And also, you guys are a little young, but it's one of the most classic Western movies out there. So I was supposed to talk about my path to the health science administrator position. So how did I get there, and then how do you get there if you want to have a career in government science administration? So I have a Ph.D., as I mentioned, in nutrition. I studied enzyme kinetics in the folate-dependent one-carbon metabolic pathway for 7 long years. And then I thought, well, maybe this isn't exactly what I want to do. So I was accepted into a postdoctoral fellowship at the National Cancer Institute, and it's actually called the Cancer Prevention Fellowship Program. And what it was is the first year, if you had only basic science training, they made you go to a Master of Public Health focusing on epidemiology and biostatistics. It didn't matter what you were doing. If you got into this program, you had to go a year. And I went to Johns Hopkins. They sent me. I went. It was the best and the worst year of my life. I took 86 credits in 11 months, but I did it. And then I came back to the NIH after that year, and I took a research position in the Laboratory of Human Carcinogenesis in the Center for Cancer Research. That is one of our intramural programs. And I was in a laboratory, but I was a molecular epidemiologist in the laboratory. So I was the one that helped the basic scientists with their population-based study designs, and I'm the one that sort of guided them and helped them analyze their data. Then I had a lot of soul searching to do, because I didn't think I wanted to go into an academic position, and I didn't think I wanted to stay in the laboratory, but it was really difficult to cut that tether. That's a tough one to do when you've been doing it for 10 years. So I actually went into career counseling. The NIH has career counseling. I went, and we had a few sessions, and I did some different things that said, list every skill you have. And I thought, wow, I have all these skills. And then they said, now check off the ones you like using. Well, once I checked off all the ones I liked using, I was like, wow, I'm spending all my time using skills I don't like. So they told me what careers would be better for me and that I would enjoy using some of the skills. So I ended up moving into my current position in 2010. And then in 2011, we started having discussions about where there might be this gap where nobody was really supporting metabolomics and their sort of use in these larger prospective cohorts. So a couple of things that I do, this is just a quick thing. I do meetings. So a couple of years ago, in 2014, we brought together 45 scientists from all over the world who had metabolomics data in large prospective cohorts. We had a think tank, we brought them in and we said, okay, we want you to work together, we want you to have research priorities identified and biostatistics and bioinformatics priorities identified by the time you leave this room. So after a 2-day meeting, we had priorities identified in each of those areas, and we developed what is now called the Consortium of Metabolomic Studies, or COMETS. It now is 2017, not even 3 years since we've had that meeting, and we have a large consortium from the United States, Europe, South America, and Asia that has 43 participating prospective cohorts. These individuals meet monthly, and they work together to move the agenda forward to make sure that they're all using similar analytic tools, or if analytic tools need developed, they put all their bioinformaticists and biostatisticians together so they have all the great minds working together instead of isolation. So you can have all these great people working in their silos, but it's amazing how quickly the science moves forward if you bring them together. So I'm the one that brings people together, and it's really been an exciting experience. So that's the kind of stuff I get to do. And so I just want to say what the COMETS objectives are so you get a good sense. It provides a framework to foster international collaborations among studies, to share common objectives. It provides a forum for discussion, development, and pursuit of new collaborative studies and research directions. It supports the development of early career scientists. This is one of their biggest things they support, our training group. They want to advance the knowledge of the metabolome and to improve our understanding of prediction of disease etiology, diagnosis, and prognosis. So ultimately, based on these objectives, the aim of this group, they want to facilitate an open exchange of ideas, knowledge, and results in order to accelerate the study of metabolites associated with chronic disease phenotypes. And that's kind of a big deal because now you have 43 groups working together to accomplish this. So just a quick plug, if anybody is actually interested in this group, we do have a poster tomorrow, tonight, sorry, I'm on the wrong day, tonight at the evening poster session, and Dr. Singh, who's on the steering committee at Stanford, is going to present poster 221. So if you do have an interest in that, please stop by. So what skills do you need to have a job like mine? You actually have to have strong scientific knowledge and ability to build a scientific brand. So my brand, when everybody at the NIH says we need somebody for metabolomics, they're like Krista. Or if somebody says, oh, what does Krista do? Metabolomics. So you have to have your knowledge, and they have to be recognized as an expert in the field. You have to have strong management and organizational skills. You have to have the skills and ability to lead teams successfully, understand how to make the team members feel ownership of the process, and you have to know how to build consensus. Trust me, with 43 groups working together, I cannot underscore this enough. You have to have the ability to be a strong contributing team member. So I always say, you need to learn when to pick your battles, and quite frankly, most of the time, you just don't pick them. So, really, you have to be a good team member, and you only really need to fight for those things that you really feel strongly about and let the rest of it go. You have to have a lot of self-motivation to seek out those scientific gaps and develop strategies to address those gaps. You have to find something you're really passionate about. Like, I spent a lot of time like, I don't know about this or that, and I floundered for a year and a half thinking, oh, what am I going to do? And then this area really I got excited about. You also have to be able to work under deadlines, sometimes very tight ones. This year, something came down, some funding was released, a law was passed or a bill was passed, and all of a sudden I get an email at 9 a.m., I need you in a half hour in my office, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm at physical therapy, so this is going to be a problem. So, within 4 hours, we had a bunch of money come available, and we had to figure out what to do with it. So these deadlines can be quick. So you always have to have your best ideas in your back pocket, and you have to be able to pull them out and write them up within 3 or 4 hours. Sometimes 1 to 2 days. That's actually not too tight of a deadline, but you have to be able to work under deadlines. You have to have the ability to manage multiple projects and activities seamlessly at one time. I have like 10 things going on all the time. You just have to get it done. You have to have strong technical and non-technical writing skills because you have to write both ways. And also, if you're going to work in any type of government, you really have to have the patience to work through the bureaucracy. You have to learn to go with the flow, work with the flow of the government, not against it. You can get so much more accomplished if you know the policies and just work with it. So if you want to transition from an early career academic researcher to a position in government science administration, one thing is, this is not necessary, but this is what really helped me, is I had a government postdoctoral research position. And although it's not necessary, I can't lie and say that it didn't help me. That was one of the things. I was familiar with the government. But let's say that you don't have that option. So you have to build your CV or resume with the right skill set. So what are those skills? You want to develop project management skills during graduate and postdoctoral training, either directly or non-directly related to your research project. So a few things I did, I ended up toward the end having a large genome-wide association study. It was a collaboration between 8 or 10 groups or labs. I had to manage that. That looked really good on my CV. I planned a career fair for 1,000 fellows. That's a large project, but it's not directly related to my research project. You want to seize the opportunity to plan meetings and workshops. This is tough because you all need to be focusing on getting your papers out and getting your research done. But if you think you want to do it in a more administrative position, you have to find a little bit of time to develop some of these other skills. Because a lot of what my job is, almost every year I plan a large meeting and bring stakeholders together. When asked to do peer review for manuscripts, abstracts, proposals, accept the invitation. You have to show that you can review science and review it well. And apply for leadership positions. A good example here is the Metabolomic Society Early Career Members Network. During my time, I was on the equivalent in the American Association of Cancer Research. It was the Associate Member Council. I was also on the NIH Fellows Committee, so those things helped a great deal. And also attend training for science writing, public speaking, and effectively working with others. Any career development training you can show you have is helpful. So my final thoughts. If you're not sure what you want to do and you think, well, maybe government might be for me or maybe something else might be for me, go on informational interviews and do them early and often. Don't wait till it's time to find a job, because these are not ways to find a job. These are ways to get information. And you can look up informational interviews and get information. And I can actually give it to you at the end of the workshop if you need it. This helps you identify what jobs you'll be interested in and what skills these jobs require. So then you can build your resume in that area. Also, talk to your mentor, advisor, PI about what you need to develop your skills for the job. Find a mentor who is not your direct supervisor. They help guide and advise you. This is very important because sometimes you can't really go talk to your advisor or your PI about how you might not want to have an academic position. So find someone you can talk to that can assist you. When you volunteer for resume building activities, treat it like a job. Do the tasks well and complete them on time. It's a very small world, and everybody just seems to know everybody else. So do them well, and people, will talk about that you did a good job. And finally, if you don't know about individual development plans, you might want to look those up. You can look at AAAS. Those help keep you on track. If you are thinking about going into a certain career, you may want to start thinking about these individual development plans and working on one of those to keep you on track throughout your training. So I want to thank you for your time, and we can answer questions during the panel.
Krista, I see the mic is not on. Yeah.
I don't have slides. Maybe you can have something more neutral. Okay, good. I didn't bring any slides. I apologize for that. So you just have to look at me. I really like Krista's comment about the small world. Metabolomics is a small world. You know, when you go to a conference like this, chances are you literally meet everyone. You know, like this is such a great meeting. You know, metabolomics is a really small community, and you really meet the relevant people in science, in industry. You know, everyone is here. That's great. That's a great meeting. Just a quick comment. Okay, so what am I doing? My name is Ralf Tautenhahn. I work for Thermo Fisher Scientific. My job title is Platform Manager for Metabolomics Software, sometimes also called Product Manager. They change these titles around every once in a while. I've been with Thermo Fisher Scientific for 4 years now, and it's been a really good time for me. And I'll try to convince you why it's good to work in industry, or what the benefits are of that. So how did I end up at Thermo Fisher Scientific? I graduated from the Martin Luther University in Halle-Wittenberg in, when was that, 2004, as a bioinformatician. This whole thing with bioinformatics was relatively new back then. I was actually the first one to graduate from that university. And then I got involved in metabolomics. That just happened to be. I had an interest in chemistry. I also have an undergrad degree in biology, so I was interested in chemistry and IT, so bioinformatics was really my thing. And at that time, they had a new group at the Institute for Plant Biochemistry in Halle. Steffen Neumann was heading that group, and so I joined his group right when it was created. That was in 2005. And those were really the early days for metabolomics. There was really no software at this point. I was challenged with basically creating a raw data processing pipeline for the lab, and I looked, and there was really not much out there. So my choices were basically developing something from the scratch or reaching out to other people who were trying to do something similar. Unfortunately, I was able to find someone else who was trying to achieve something similar, and that was Colin Smith at the Scripps Research Institute in La Jolla, California, who had just started to develop XCMS at that time. Yeah, I reached out to Colin, and I was able to contribute to XCMS, and it was a really fun time to work with Colin. In general, I have to say my career decisions were highly affected by two emails in particular. I mean, these days we do everything by email, but sometimes you get more important emails, and I have two emails that I want to point out. So while I was working at the Institute for Plant Biochemistry, around sometime 2008, I got an email from Gary Schustek from at Scripps Research, and he invited me to join his lab if I want, as a postdoc. So I thought, okay, that sounds like a good idea. Why not? So after I got my Ph.D. in 2009, I went to the Scripps Research Institute in La Jolla, California. Gary Schustek's lab. Colin was gone by then, unfortunately, so I was like the new Colin. I was doing a lot of things around XCMS and Metlin and this kind of thing. And that was a really good time in Gary's lab. I had the opportunity to work with Gary Petty, Oscar Yanes, and Jiang Xu, who's actually here. I just met him, and many others. So that was a great time to meet people. At the same time, I was also exploring options with my own company. So I had my own small company for a while. I'll get back to this later. And then I received that second important email, and that was from a former colleague who had joined Thermo Fisher Scientific in the meantime, and he asked me if I would be interested in a position in industry. So, okay, I looked into that. And at ASMS this year, I met Mark Sanders and Ken Miller at ASMS. We just got together, talked, and so everything sounded good, and I joined Thermo Fisher. I'll get back to what exactly it is I'm doing in a moment. So in general, I'm involved in software projects, obviously, things like MZ-Cloud and Compound Discover, and especially Compound Discover I'm very excited about. So that's my product, so to speak. That's the product I'm responsible for, and we're just about to release a new version of Compound Discover, and you can hear all about this if you come to our booth. And this is some of the things, obviously, I do. I present the product at the conference. I'm sneaking in the product at this presentation. I hope it's okay. But that's what I'm doing, okay? So what is it exactly that I'm doing? As a product manager, you are responsible for the product. You are the face of the product, right? You make the product accessible to people, whoever they are. So first of all, as a product manager, you define the product. You say what's in, what's out for each release. And you do this not based on what you know, but a lot of this is coming from you guys actually. What is the community asking about? What do people need? Where's the market going, right? So you gain this knowledge based on, conferences, for example. You talk to people, you talk to customers, you read their publications. So this is where you get this knowledge. But then you define the product. You work with a really big team. That's one of the exciting aspects of my work. So obviously you work with the software developers. You are in constant communication with them. You also work with the testers. We have, you might not know this, but software products are really thoroughly tested. So they go through this rigorous testing process, and for this we have a separate team, product testers, great team. You work with these guys. You work with the technical writers. You work, well, there were more people out there, like a project manager. Anyway, it's a great team, and you're in constant communication with this extended team to really define the product and drive the development process forward. And it always goes in these cycles, right? You define a product and you work on it, and then typically there's like a big conference like ASMS or so where the products are presented, and we move in these development cycles, and it's really exciting to see the product grow, see the product assume shape and getting better and better from version to version. So this is really a very exciting aspect. Then of course you represent the product. Actually, most of these things that I'm saying are also true for hardware product managers. So hardware, software products in terms of product management are very similar. So you represent the product at conferences, trade shows, meetings, this is one of the things you do. You work with the marketing teams to promote the software, to create content, websites, manuals, videos, this kind of stuff. And what's really important is that you're in constant communication with the customers. So all the, researchers that collaborators, you're in constant communication with them to basically keep your knowledge up to date, find out what people are working on, because very often you try to be one step ahead. Of course, we also follow the publications, right? But you need to see what's coming next. What are people working on? How can we incorporate this? How can we drive the software and the hardware forward to include the latest features? The pros and cons of my position. Let's see. I'll start with the cons. So when I was a postdoc, I really liked to be able to do what I want, right? As a postdoc in academia, you can really do pretty much what you want. You can go into any direction of research. So that's gone. You can't do this anymore, okay? Another thing is you probably get to publish less. So if you like to be visible to the community, you're less visible at this point, right? You're hiding behind a team, right? Of course, you're still free to publish, but it's a different thing, right? It's unlikely that you will see your name very first in a publication that often. It's always a big team that's producing stuff. The third one is pretty much a summary of these two. So you give up a lot of this independence and flexibility, right? You, in research, you are independent, you are flexible. Of course, it also depends on your PI and the greater team, but so you give up a lot of this. Okay, I'm getting to the pros now. What I like is you don't have to write grant applications. Also, there's no pressure to publish, okay? So if that's really not your thing, writing grant applications, good, then industry is a good position for you. You work, that's a pro for me, you work product or result oriented. In research, people often, they just do their thing for quite a while and something may or may not come out of it, right? In the industry, something has to come out of it in a defined time. There has to be a product at the end of it, right? So you really walk towards this goal, and that really drives you, and it's pretty exciting to see this happen. I already mentioned working as a team. That's great. We have this team not just locally, but also globally. Thermo Fisher Scientific is a large company, 50,000 employees. So when I came to Australia, or before when I was planning my trip, I reached out to my colleagues in Australia. I asked them, okay, let me know where to go. I brought my family along. I'm going to stay a little longer. So I asked them where to go, and they told me, okay, you go there and there. Cairns, it's a great place to go, and I like that. You can always reach out to your colleagues around the globe. I have to agree with Krista, what she said in terms of being exposed to the latest trends, but this is a slightly different context, right? I mean, Krista has to pretty much plan ahead in terms of funding, and we plan ahead in terms of products. So, like I mentioned earlier, you always try to keep up to date with the latest research and plan ahead, right? But in terms of products. So, same thing, but just slightly different perspective. And the last thing is working with customers. So you constantly work with customers. You are always exposed to customers in, I should say, good ways and bad ways, right? So if you represent the product, they will always come to you and say, this thing is not working, or I would like to see that differently. On the pro side, you know, you really see what people like about it, and you see how well the product matches the needs of the market or the community. So that's really good. Advice that I would like to give. Some of this was already covered by Krista's presentation. I have to agree, she also made this one point. Going to interviews early, actually even before you're really applying for a job, go and do interviews, right? Even if you don't really want that particular job, but it really helps you to get in contact with the industry, right? Or whatever position you're applying for. So do job interviews even if you don't want that job. Also, it's a good practice. Depending on how they do the interview, it might be interesting for you to simply try it out first. But interviews are one of the good ways to get in contact with the right people. I'll get back to the right people in just a moment. Conferences like this are a great way to reach out to partners in industry, potential employers. So there are these booths, right, that we have at conferences, and at big conferences like ASMS, there are the hospitality suites. Go there. My advice is, go there early. Don't go there late at night. Be the first one to be there when they open at 7 or 8 p.m. Then everybody's fresh, there are not many people there. You can actually get to talk to the right people. Everybody's there. Hardware manager, hardware product managers, software product managers, all the application specialists, you get to meet the right people. So go to ASMS, hospitality suites, go there early at night. I would like to mention a common mistake that people often make when they talk to big companies. And I think I made the same mistake in my past. It's often when you are, let's say you're on research and then you meet a representative from company X and you talk to them about, I don't know, about career or their products. People often assume that this one person knows everything about the company and knows everyone inside the company. That's wrong. That's simply wrong. So if you try to pursue a career in industry and you try to get in contact with the right people, don't rely on just that one person. Chances are that one person might simply not know everyone else, or might just not have the big picture. In a company that has 50,000 employees, things are complicated. That's the same for all the big companies. So what I'm trying to say here is try to get in contact with the right people. Find out who it is who's in charge of whatever you're interested in, and try to get through to these people. And again, the conferences are a great way or a great place to do that. Just in case you're thinking about starting your own business, try it sooner, rather sooner than later. The later in your career, you might be less adventurous, you might try less things. Also, you probably have a family by then, and so you don't want to have this high risk. Some of this was also mentioned by Krista. You would want to find partners or some people who can give you advice outside of your research focus. Try to find someone outside who you can talk about what you're trying to do. That's important. Look into SBIR, STTR grants. That's really a great way to get started. Otherwise, your own company, you have no funding. And SBIR, STTR programs are really a great chance to get funding. It's free money basically, right? I mean, I don't know. I really like it. It's a beautiful way to try things out. Last advice for starting your own business: even if you think you have a great product, don't just think about the product. You have to think about the customers too. That's another common mistake. People think they have something fantastic, but they haven't really reached out to see what people might think about this. So also do this homework in terms of marketing. Skills required. A lot of good points were covered by Krista already. When you go in for an interview in industry, you want to present yourself as a subject matter expert. How do you do this? You probably have a long list of publications on your CV. That's very impressive, but that's not the most important thing. That's not really what people look at. What you want to point out is that you have the relevant experience. So whatever job you're applying for, try to really find out what this job is about and then highlight the relevant aspects of whatever you've done in terms of research or industry experience. You want to highlight that in your CV. This is really what people are looking for, the relevant experience. When you go in for an interview, do your research first. Like I said, find out about the industry, find out about the people that are involved, listen carefully, and ask good questions. Of course, you have to be a team player. I mentioned this work in large teams. You have to have the ability to lead a large team, to work with a large team. I think that's pretty much common for all the positions that we're talking about here. And the last thing I have is the transition from academia to industry. That was one of the things I was actually concerned about when I made this move. And I have to say it's really not worth talking about. It's so simple. There is not much transitioning. And when I interviewed at Thermo, I asked Ian Jardine, who has retired a couple of years ago. I asked him that question, and he said, at the end of the day, as a scientist or as an engineer, you solve problems, right? That's what we do, and that's the same in research, in academia, and I figure it's similar in government. So with that, I would like to end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ralph. That was great. So now I would like to invite Mary Boyce.
Sir.
So you can either use the keys on this if you want, and if you want to point, you can use them.
Thanks for this opportunity to speak today. Like Krista and Ralph, I'm going to first of all talk about what my job looks like, the good and not so good things about my job. I'll give you a personal account of how I got my job and how I've progressed. And then I'll end with some suggestions as to how you might get a job like mine, should you want one. So I'm an academic. I'm your standard stock academic. We're called a researcher, teacher, scholar, and that essentially involves me doing research, teaching, and a certain amount of administration or service. That's the most common role. There are some staff members or some academics that will have a teaching focused role, or maybe they might have a research role. But for most of us, we tend to be in the middle ground here. For me, I'm a 40-40-20 at the moment, but that can vary. Sometimes you might increase your research or increase your teaching depending on what you're interested in, depending on your circumstances. So with a 40-40-20 role at the moment, I would have, in my teaching, I would have about 12 contact hours per week. I would teach I teach about 4 units per year, 5 units. For example, just this semester ending, I taught a third-year chemistry unit. It's a small unit, 30 students, and so I did it myself. I also taught a large first-year unit, a science communications unit. It's a large unit with 350 students. We deliver it on campus, we deliver it online, and obviously I can't do that all myself, so I end up with lots of tutors helping me run the sessions. And so that unit takes a lot of, takes a lot of work. I'm sure I'm loud enough anyhow. It takes a lot of administration, organisation. I had to develop resources to suit an online learning environment as well as an on-campus environment. Because I've got 7 tutors, I'm going to have to prepare lots of resources for them. So a lot of that is administration as well as teaching. In the research, in my 40% research, at the moment that obviously is about research. I have 5 Ph.D. students and a master's student. I've got a research grant that's supporting a postdoc at the moment. And And I'm also new to metabolomics, relatively new to metabolomics, and we are setting up a metabolomics facility at ECU with Professor David Broadhurst. So as an analytical chemist, I'm getting to do something totally new, or it feels like totally new anyhow. And the last part of my job is I'm postgraduate coordinator, so that's my administrative role. I was asked to talk about the pros and cons. I think the main pros, and I think they're similar to what Ralph and Krista have talked about, the main pros is the, I suppose, the flexibility, the autonomy, the fact that you're always learning, you're always being challenged, and you're certainly never bored. The other thing I think that's quite good about my job is I work in my school is quite multidisciplinary, so I work with a marine crew, biologists, environmentalists, food people, mathematicians. And so a lot of my research is collaborative, and I really like that collaborative approach to research. It's rather than that competitive. I don't think I'd do so well if I was one of 20 chemists and we're all competing and doing very similar work. So I like that approach. We value each other's research, and we assume each other have the expertise in our particular area, and we work together to do that. And the last thing, as I get older and older, I really do enjoy working with young people. It's not only undergraduates, and I get to see a lot of undergraduates with that big first year unit, but even recently working with developing this metabolomic facility, getting to work with recent graduates, people who are just finishing their Ph.Ds and doing their first postdoc with us. It's such a two-way stream. They sort out all my technology problems, and they've got me up to speed on how to use my phone effectively, and all of that stuff that's and using data analysis, everything from Excel and so on. So it's lovely working with young people who are enthusiastic, passionate, and just see life as a lot of fun. So that's been really nice. The cons, they're the usual. Just work. You can never say you've finished a day and that you've done your job and there's nothing else to do. I used to say that I was about 6 months behind. I'm just years behind now. There's no way you could ever get all your work done. What you've got to do is just avoid it overwhelming you. Probably the other thing is to get better at saying no. But saying that, if you like being challenged and you like being busy, and as long as you don't get too stressed or concerned about that, it's never all going to get done. Doesn't matter. And the main probably disadvantage of my job, and one that I actually have very little control over, is the paperwork. Definitely administration and covering your butt, and there's always an audit, and there's always somebody wanting you to prove that you're doing a great job. So probably that's the bit I don't like about academia. I was then asked to talk about my journey, and in telling you a little bit about my journey, I hope to answer some of these questions. I got my BSc honours a long time ago, before internet. I got my honours in 1987, went straight into do a PhD, and by 1990 I was writing up and looking for a job. In 1990 in Ireland, there was 18% unemployment, and that was the national average. You can imagine for young graduates, it was a lot higher. So to be honest, I wasn't really thinking about what job would I like, what will I do next. It was more about how can I get a job? Are there any jobs out there for me? And I applied for my first job somewhere in, it must have been maybe June, July of 1990, and I actually landed it. And it was an academic position at the Waterford Institute of Technology. And so I started working there, doing a lot of teaching, and at the weekends and night writing up my PhD. So by 1991, I'd got my PhD. I'd done a year at Waterford, and they had offered me a permanent position. I thought, yeah, great, fantastic, I'm done, sorted. And at the similar time, I remember this older, probably disgruntled person who shared the office with me saying, Mary, just get out of here. You're too young. Don't settle in, this place. And he shoved a job in front of me and said, there's a job. And I looked at him and went, oh, okay, Australia. I applied for the job, did the interview, had no idea where Perth was, didn't worry about it, landed the job and thought, well, might as well go for 2 years. And I headed off. I was 25 and I had been offered this position in Perth. And again, no internet. I didn't know what Edith Cowan University was. I assumed it was just like my university that I had graduated from. So I headed off out here, and really in 1992 I spent the first year surviving. Just again, I spent a lot of time preparing units across the spectrum of chemistry. I was an inorganic chemist. I was suddenly teaching analytical chemistry, organic chemistry, and also, I suppose, I came to ECU just after it had been made a university. So before that, it was a teachers' college, and very quickly I became aware that the university were very serious and very keen for research to be a strong part of an academic's life, our career, and so this was about 1993. I was, getting up to speed in my teaching. I could feel the pressure on to get research happening. I'd finished my PhD. I'd written it up, and I was working full time. I'd got it, and I'd come to ECU, and I was busy teaching. I, at that stage, had no publications. I had just my PhD, and my first publication ended up being in 1995, and that was from my PhD. So I was feeling the pain and thinking, I've got to get my research back up again. Because it was a teacher training college, many of the staff that were there had no research expertise or very limited research expertise, so I didn't have anyone necessarily to, work with or collaborate with. And the other thing was that I couldn't really resume my PhD studies because they didn't have the infrastructure. I was a crystallographer, and so I really had to think, what can I do in this environment? While I was teaching, I was doing a lot of analytical chemistry, and I really enjoyed it. I thought, this is actually quite a nice area. I was doing bits of HPLC, GC, and I hit upon capillary electrophoresis, and it was new, and very little had been done. We had the first instrument actually at Edith Cowan University. It sat in the corner, and nobody quite knew what it did. Someone bought it and left it. And I really, at that point, I just went for it and thought, I have got to get my research, so I've got to get research up and running. So every time I wasn't in the teaching, I was in the lab learning how to use this instrument. Then I started applying for funding. I started collaborating with someone else who was new to the university but had a strong research record. And between about 1995 and about 1998, I just got some papers together, wrote grants, and then once I got a couple of papers under my belt, I applied for study leave, and from there, and that was pivotal, because once I got study leave, and again, a new university to research, study leave wasn't something you automatically got. So I got study leave in 1999 and went to University of Hobart, or University of Tasmania in Hobart, and that was absolutely pivotal, because I was almost like a postdoc, I suppose. I spent 6 months in the lab, and I learned how to convert research into publications, and that's really important in an academic scene. So of course I need to go back and answer those two questions. That why did I choose this career? Well, I can honestly say that I didn't choose it, it chose me, but I did choose to stay in it. The other thing why I wanted to tell you that story was that I came into academia with a very strong weakness. Very quickly I realised I have a weakness here that I need to fill. I need to get my research up and running so that I actually had, I was a rounded academic. I had my teaching and my research and my administration. And I think it's true for most people going into an academic role or any job really, you're going to have gaps, and you just have to figure out what they are, and you've got to put in extra energy and extra time to fill that gap, while at the same time doing your normal job. So in 2000, I felt I'd made it. I felt I had I could demonstrate research. Remember, I was still doing a full teaching load, about 16 hours per week. I had just got a chemistry degree up and running, so that was my administrative role. And I had nailed 12 papers in, which doesn't sound very much, 12 papers in 3 years. But that was almost all first author. That was almost all generated from me being in the lab and actually doing the work. But it was great because it gave me confidence, and it gave me an opportunity then to apply for funding. I started being able to write a couple of reviews, which are really good for citations. The other thing I suppose I wanted to mention as well is that you often have to look at what your situation is and make the most of it. So I was in a university, there was 2 chemistry staff members. There was always going to be a lot of teaching, and there was no way out around it. So you might as well either be good at it, and I was lucky, I enjoyed it. I think I'm pretty good at it. I loved the laboratory environment for teaching. I just think it's amazing. It's so much more enjoyable than lectures. And so early on, I was taking a lot of what I was doing in research, and I was converting it, or I might do some research on capillary electrophoresis, and then I'd say, hey, gee, that'd make a neat experiment for the undergraduates. And I'd go in and I'd design an undergraduate experiment. And there was nothing out there at the time on capillary electrophoresis. So while I was doing all this teaching and doing some nice, producing some nice resources, I decided to start publishing them. And so I published several of my experiments in Journal of Chemical Education, which is published by the American Chemical Society. So while it mightn't have the same status as a research publication, it was one of the better journals in chemical education research. And it meant it gave me, if I'm going to be spending a lot of time doing teaching, I wanted to make sure I could demonstrate that I was good at it and that I had outcomes. And so all through my career, I've continued to do some teaching, research, and publish, because I'm always going to have to do a lot of teaching in my institution. Okay, getting back to the third question on this slide, would I do anything differently? I probably wasn't very strategic. I wasn't very focused. I think and this opportunity to speak to you actually was quite a bit daunting, because I had to reflect and I had to think about all the things I did wrong and if I'd only known. But there were lots of things. I wasn't focused. I wasn't driven for a particular goal. Most of the time I was actually just enjoying myself, taking up opportunities. And if I wanted to be a full academic or a full professor at 50, I probably shouldn't have done as much teaching. I shouldn't have got involved in, I should have focused just on the research. I did way more teaching and teaching pedagogy and teaching leadership than I probably needed to do. But saying that, I enjoy it. And you gotta get that balance between being totally driven and getting to the top and deciding, well, I want to enjoy myself along the way as well. So, yes, I definitely would do a few things. I probably would be a little bit more focused, but I probably would still do a lot of the teaching and that developing of tools. And I did a graduate certificate in tertiary teaching, so I actually understood a bit more about teaching, because a lot of the time we go into academia and we don't have a qualification in teaching. So again, that just gave me more confidence in my ability. The last thing I was asked to talk about was to give you advice. If you want to go into an academic, take on an academic career, what advice would I give you? And I really thought, ooh, that's a big call. So I decided, rather than have an N of 1, I would go around and canvass some of my colleagues. So I harassed 9 colleagues from 3 universities, both male and female, varying from level B, lecturer, relatively young, right up to professor, and asked them what they thought. And I've collated what they said here. The first thing I think I think all of them actually said, make sure you realise what an academic job involves. Make sure that you realise we don't ask, we're not just looking for researchers anymore. We're not saying that if you've got a research background, that'll be enough. It might be true for some institutions, but for most institutions, teaching is core business. We get funded for our students, so we need people who are good teachers. Recently, I was on an interview panel for a level B, level C position at my university for an environmental management person. All 4 of those criteria were listed. And interestingly, we also put on experience in online teaching. And so that's something that's getting bigger and more mainstream in a university. So maybe something to think about if you have some opportunities to do online learning or online teaching. Have a go. The other thing is, and you've heard this already, you're in a postdoc position, you need to gain the other skills that you aren't getting from that postdoctoral position. In an academic role, you need to show some evidence of teaching. And to be honest, it has to be more than giving the odd guest lecture. It needs to be more structured and more, it needs to involve usually some curriculum development. What a postdoc did in our institution, and I thought it was quite clever. She had a 3-year postdoc, but I think either for a year and a half, she asked that she go 80% on that postdoc. So she extended her postdoctoral time and used the 20% or 30% to take on some teaching. So at the end of her, what might then have been a 4-year postdoctoral position, 3 years but spread over 4 years, she also got some real teaching experience. So she took on a unit, coordinated a unit, had to deal with students. So she has just got, it's lovely to see this girl has just got an academic position in over East, I don't know which university, but so it was a strategy that I think paid off for her. The other thing that, having talked to some of the younger researchers, some of the younger academics who started off as early career researchers in academia and they have lost that status, and they were saying, don't waste it. There are so many opportunities for early career researchers where there's funds available for just you, or there's funding bodies that will just fund you, and so don't waste it. Make the most of those opportunities. Obviously, mentoring is very important. Try and find somebody that understands the academic system and can tell you about opportunities that are coming up, can give you advice on what's missing from your CV. Collaborate, obviously, is very important. One academic staff member did actually say, just tell them don't do it. However, he's actually at the conference here. He's a very well-recognized researcher and still does quite a lot of teaching. So I don't think I believed him. And these guys got a bit enthusiastic, and so they sent me emails and with lots of advice. And I've just put some of the advice they've given on a slide. I'm just about out of time. I suppose, so very quickly, make sure you understand what an academic position is. It is more lifestyle than occupation. It's not a 9-to-5er. Everyone's path is different. Mine is probably quite different to a lot of you. You probably have a strong research background, and you're actually going to be trying to get your teaching background up. everyone is different. And when you get into that position, look at what your environment is like. Okay, it might be different in different universities. And I suppose my favourite one here is my one. Remember, your career is only one aspect of your life. You know, you got to make sure you're enjoying yourself. So while everyone tells you be focused and driven and go for the top, just make sure you're enjoying yourself as you get there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mary. It was very nice, and nice to see that an academic doesn't give a talk on anything without doing a little research project first. So now we would like to invite the speakers to come up here, and then we are open for questions. So the people that have questions, if you could please come forward to the mic. We have quite a lot of time, so just come with all your questions.
So does anyone have any questions to start off with? These are all very friendly people, so don't feel intimidated.
Hi, I'm Anubhav from Monash University. I'm in the second year of my postdoc, so finished my PhD 2 years ago. And my question is for Ralph. When somebody from academia who's done research all their lives apply for or reach out to people in the industry, what are the things that you actually look for? Obviously, you talked about other skills that you develop, but is a person coming from a university just branded as an academic and maybe not given as much priority compared to somebody who went straight into industry just after their PhD and have a little bit of an experience? Like, how can we try and use our expertise to sort of put ourselves to the same level as somebody who's already has some industry experience?
Right. I think, it also depends what you're applying for, right? I mean, if you're looking for, like, let's say, application specialist position, this kind of thing, you don't need to have any experience in industry. It's not required. The only thing that you really need is to show that you have this really strong expertise in that application area, right? Just be good at that and demonstrate it. That's good enough, you know? And when you go for an interview, people will look for these typical skills, right? Again, depending on what you're applying for. Can you, if you, I don't know, let's say if you're an application specialist in, let's say, marketing, then you would work more, internally with less contact to customers, then it's really primarily about your skills, like technical skills. If you're in a position where you go out to customers, then they will also look for this kind of quality, right? Will you be able to present the company? Can you speak? Can you represent the product? This kind of thing. So, but again, experience in industry is not required in most positions, unless you really want to apply for something high up, for manager position or something. For director, then you should probably have the relevant experience in industry.
I don't think you're dead in the water for an academic position. I think you might just have to have you got any teaching experience, or is it? Oh, okay. And have you? And when you say, how would you describe your research now? Would you be able to articulate it as being within a discipline area?
Yes. Well, I guess
Yeah.
now, the next step would be to actually fuse back all the skills that I have. So I've learned a
Yeah.
whole amount of skills, and I've been to a lot of big name universities, but that doesn't really, it's not what drives me. So right now I'm more in chemistry, but I'd like to bring it back into the context of maybe metabolomics.
Okay.
Mix my
Yeah.
molecular biology with my mass spec experience.
I-
Have a career in that direction.
I think of the fact that you've got that multidisciplinary approach, which is so important for lots of schools, especially in universities now, because there is no school of chemistry anymore, no school of environmental management. And the job that we advertised for recently, we were asking for someone who was, not just environmental management. We wanted them to have expertise in sustainability and impact assessment. So I actually think having that broader range of skills would actually be useful. To get the interview, you probably need to, you'll have to look for, I suppose, universities that are looking for that breadth. And if you can, if you were interested into academia, you've just got to see, can you get some sessional work, and ideally sessional teaching. And with your set of skills, you would think you should be able to as well.
So it's not just about finding the job. I can find the job, but when it comes to funding and having my own career, how do I get past the fact maybe it's not my first step? And I'm 5 years past my early career.
So which country are you in?
Australia.
Okay, so I don't know how the federal funding in Australia works, unfortunately. However, what it sounds like to me is to get the early career training awards, you would need to be within the first 5 years past your graduation date of your Ph.D. to do that.
Krista, sorry, I can speak a little bit about the Australian system, just
please do,
because I've recently moved here and learned a little bit about it. But I think actually the Australian system is really good compared to the rest of the world. So it seemed like, so I'm from Canada, and it seemed like we had these opportunities for early career fellowships and stuff, but as soon as you hit that cutoff, it was either you are in an academic position or you've kind of lost that opportunity. In Australia, it seems to be a little bit better. So for example, there's the NHMRC New Investigator Awards. Now I know that NHMRC is changing over, but basically I think the criteria for that was that you could apply for this project grant as a new investigator as long as you had never held significant funding from a national body. So I think it was like if you had not held a grant worth $250,000 and you're within like 10 years, I think, of your PhD, you were eligible to apply for that. So I'm finding that there are actually a lot of opportunities if you try to, look for them. So maybe they're not maybe some of these standard opportunities we wouldn't think that we're eligible for anymore, but there are kind of other ones. And there's also, I think a lot of the Australian institutions subscribe to something called, I think it's called Research Professional. Mary, I think it's called Research Professional, but it should be through your academic institution. And they subscribe to, it's basically a database of all the funders the funders that subscribe in the world. So for example, I can see any kind of NIH or Canadian funding that I might be eligible for, and you can just put in search criteria and stuff like that, and hopefully that can help.
I guess actually one of the challenges for me was that I am originally from Jordan, so I wasn't eligible to apply for any of the grants in the early part of my career. Then I became Canadian, but that was already too late for the 5-year cutoff, so I became Canadian last year. So that was one of the major challenges, because there's some funding for international students, but not enough.
Have you also considered possibly looking at foundation grants? I know that, when at least in the United States, when that weighs into, your tenure and things, it's not as weighed as heavily as a federal grant. However, if there's something available in that area, that would give you something to show that you were able to acquire some funding and complete a research project, which may help. So looking beyond your standard, federal funding, and starting to maybe look like, I'm thinking maybe this list that Stacy's talking about, but different foundation fundings. The other thing I might recommend, since your case is a bit complex, we all mentioned sort of mentors. You may want to find a mentor that can sort of help guide you through it. Somebody that can look at your CV, someone that can sort of look at the path that you've taken, advise you on maybe any gaps that need filled, and sort of what opportunities might be available for you. Like, I can't stress that enough, because sort of managing and getting through this system yourself can be extremely challenging. And like, without me to have to, like, without probably all of us to be able to look at your CV or resume and say, this is the exact path you've taken, you know, you may be able to do this and that. So I would suggest maybe taking some time to think about somebody that you aspire to be. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but like, aspire to be, like, you know, I somebody that you look at and think, wow, their job is really great, and I would like to have a position like that. Maybe talk to them about how, if they would be willing to spend some mentoring time with you, look over your CV, have maybe a monthly meeting. With all my fellows, I actually take fellows at the government as well. I didn't mention that, but we have a monthly meeting, and we don't really talk about their work. We do at different times, but we talk about what skills do you need to get you to the next step in your career? Let me look at your resume. What needs to happen here? What do we need to do to make you get that jump? How do I help you? You need to probably find somebody, instead of just telling you what you need to do research-wise, to help you with career development and career advice. And so if you can seek someone like that out, I think that would be really helpful for you. It would give you a sounding board. I think it'd be valuable.
And also try and make a story of what you've done, rather than see it as a negative that you've jumped around. See it as, I'm actually broadening and having a multidisciplinary approach to my research. Because even how you sold it to us initially was, I've gone around, and whereas really, to me, it sounded like, gee, you actually sound like you could be very valuable in that you've got that breadth.
And I don't really know. I know very few people today that have taken a straight shot at their career. I mean, I do give a different talk. I give a different talk at NIH every year where I talk about where I bounced all over the place. When I started out, I was going to be a professor of clinical dietetics and nutrition, teaching in a didactic program to train clinical dietitians, because I'm also a registered dietitian in the United States. I'm so far from that, but I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. So don't think that where your path has taken you isn't going to land you exactly where you're supposed to be.
Do we have more questions? Could we maybe try to use the microphone, just because we're recording this session, so hopefully we'll be able to let other people listen in afterwards.
Yep, sorry, I had one more question for Ralph again. You'd mentioned that you had your own business, your own company when you were making that transition. Did that help you in any way to land the job that you have? Like the experiences that you had by starting up your own business? I'm asking because I'm sort of in a similar situation, and where I don't know whether completely to focus on my own idea or make that switch before the funding for the postdoc runs out and things like that. So can you maybe share experience?
Right. I wouldn't say it's required, but it helps. It helps a lot. First, for two reasons. First, it helps you to understand your value, literally, numbers. Second is you go through the entire process, right? You understand what it means to run a company. Even a small company, you have to do everything, right? Creating the product, thinking about marketing, you get the whole picture. So it just helps you to get this understanding. It looks good in your CV, but it's not required.
No other questions?
I have a couple questions there.
Yeah,
So one thing that I noticed among all three talks, it seemed like you all kind of just took opportunities, and it seemed there was a certain amount of randomness in this. Would you agree with that? I mean, there are certain people that we see, here at the conference where they've had very kind of linear career paths, and they've kind of seen that endpoint, and they've said, okay, this is how I'm going to work towards that endpoint. But then it's really hard as a PhD student or a postdoc to be thinking, trying to get our research done, but then also thinking about our career and making those decisions and taking that time. So do you have any advice about that, or any comments about just the sheer randomness and taking opportunities and, moving across the world, for example?
I think it's just part of you. Oh, I don't know. I think it's for me. I thought it was a deficit, but I'm not convinced it is such a deficit. To just go with the flow, and a little bit like you say, go with the flow. And if you're enthusiastic and you enjoy your job, there's always opportunities out there. And I'm a real believer in enjoying the journey as well. And so that's probably why I haven't been so focused.
So I didn't get into this because I wasn't really sure how to get into it, but I made so many poor choices. You know, like, and for me to go into going from, I was a registered dietitian in a hospital. I had done an undergraduate degree in a health-related profession, and then moved to a degree in nutritional biochemistry. That was a pretty big jump, and I really discovered early on in that degree that I didn't really enjoy it. So I kind of stuck that out for a while, thinking I just need to get this Ph.D. and get done. Then I didn't know what I was going to do. So one day I was literally sitting at the office, like talk about like how I was going to get my stipend for the year, and I looked over and there was this random flyer, cancer prevention fellowship. You get your M.P.H. and you get epidemiology, and I was like, wow, oh, people again. So I'm like, I'll apply for that. So I did that, and it was very random. And then I got to the NIH, and then I really wanted to do epidemiology, but for some reason I couldn't break the lab tether. So I went to a laboratory when I should have actually gone to an epidemiology group. So that was another poor choice. And then I stuck around the lab longer than I should because I was afraid to cut the tether because I didn't really know anything else. And then finally, when I got up enough courage to do it, I did it. But when I look back on it, that's exactly what I was supposed to do, because I couldn't be in the position that I have today without fully understanding the basic science and nutritional biochemistry, understanding, the epidemiology, and molecular epidemiology has been a really key part of me being able to do what I do and understanding the actual more basic sciencey part of epidemiology. So I look back and I think, oh, I would qualify some of these as poor choices or not naivete or not thinking things through. But when I sit where I am today, there's no question that all of those things got me here. And I really love my job, and I'm very happy, and it's exactly where I'm supposed to be. So there's a lot of randomness about it, and I think people may disagree, but I think maybe 20 years ago or 30 years ago, that linear path was much clearer when jobs in academia were more, there were more of them. Or there were more of these jobs where you could just go in a straight line, and you also kept your job for 30 years until you retired. Those days are over. So if you have a blip in the road or you go off over here, I've been here, don't get discouraged. Just do what you need to do. Try to make the best choice at the time. And ultimately, I truly believe most people end up in the career where they're supposed to be. But I may just be overly optimistic.
I think I agree. I think this, first of all, there is not really a wrong place to be, right? Even if you are in the wrong place, at some point you decide it's the wrong place for you, at least you know that. That's important, right? And chances are you learn something anyway. Second thing is this broad experience. I agree, that's extremely useful. It doesn't look bad in your CV. The only thing that might look bad is if you switch positions every year. That looks suspicious, right? Like, you can't really stick with anything if you switch every year or every other year. So if you do that, be ready to justify it, why you did it, right? But there's nothing wrong with going to different directions. We all have to figure out what we have to do. And I agree with Krista. At certain points in your career, you might think certain decisions were poor choices, right? But then again, looking back, you understand why you have been there and what you've learned. And after all, it was not wrong. It was just a different place that eventually led you to where you are now. And you can still at any time, you can switch, and maybe you switch between industry and academia back and forth, or all kind of things happen. So yes, so I would answer that question with that it's a good thing actually, and that you should be open to it.
Yeah, Yeah, I have one final question then. A lot of your jobs, or all of your jobs, have some strong people management aspect. And a lot of people in academia are natural introverts. So how have you experienced this, and do you have advice for people how you make that transition if that is not your natural environment?
So I'm not a natural introvert. I'm more on the extroverted side, but I think what's been important in my career, because a lot of people do have different skills, and I don't know, you may or may not, I don't know what countries do what different personality tests in the workplace. I know we've been switched over to the DISC. We do a DISC assessment where you have different personalities, where you're either dominant, you're influential, you're I think steadfast, or you're conscientious. So you're like a critical thinker with data. And what you have to think about in those situations is where your strengths are. I work with people who have all those personalities in my same job. And so the people that are sort of more introverted are the S's or the C's, because they're very data-oriented people, or they're ones that want to kind of be just quiet and make everybody kind of happy. They're the people pleasers. Whereas I'm very like, oh, how was your weekend? And they don't want to answer that. They don't care. So what you need to do is determine what your personality is in the workplace and try to figure out how to deal with the different work personality types. So it wouldn't probably hurt if you took one of those tests. The Myers-Briggs was one, but I don't think a lot of people use that anymore, at least in the States. But once you figure out the different personalities, you can learn how to work with those specific team members, even if you are an introvert, because you can go into it knowing who you're dealing with and knowing how to get in a D. You wouldn't want to deal with a D. You get in and you get out. So that might not answer your question, but there are ways to figure out how to manage it.
Let me guess, you're an I?
I'm an I, of course.
I guess that we actually use the same test. It's really a great tool. It helps you to understand pretty much what your leadership personality is. The DISC test. There might be free ones available. I don't know.
Maybe.
I agree. It's a great tool. And just because I've used the test, I could guess what type of personality she is.
It's very obvious.
She's probably able to guess mine. I'm more like the D type. Anyway, yeah, that's a great tool. And
No, we're all going to. I'd never heard of this, so I'm going to go and check this out. But I'm an introvert, so I know that, but I don't know about this D and I. So I think might be a few of us going to check it out. Free. And as an academic, I'm always looking for something free. Mm-hmm. So is it a free?
I'm not sure if the DISC is free, but there are other ones that are free. But I think more what large agencies or large businesses are showing is that what's more important than whether you're an introvert or an extrovert is that actually what's more important is that the individuals within those companies or large agencies know is what their own personality type is and what personality types that they can obviously pinpoint in a second when they're sitting beside them, and how you learn to interact with them so that you're most effective at your position.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Well, I think we're out of time. So please join me again in thanking our speakers today. They were very helpful. And I just wanted to highlight again, Krista mentioned this in her talk, that the EMN committee, we're very active within the Metabolomics Society, so we're putting on the workshops, we're putting on the EMN reception, we put on webinars, we'll talk about it tomorrow night at the reception. But there is an upcoming opportunity for people to join us this year. So we'll be talking about that at the reception, we'll be putting that online as well. So if you're interested in taking up this opportunity, please look into that. I think the opening ceremony starts in about an hour and a half. If you guys are looking for lunch, Jan said that there's some recommendations in the conference book. I think there's a cafe downstairs, and then just if you go towards the river, there are loads of little restaurants and cafes and stuff like that. So you can find lunch and join us back for the opening ceremonies.